All right, well, should we get it started then?
Sure.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we have a bit of probably what's going to end up being a bit of a longer show for you. Obviously, we did not have a show up on Tuesday. We apologize for that. I was at the Twins game, and I didn't feel like recording at 3 in the morning, so I'm really not that sorry about it, but that's why we didn't have a show up on Tuesday. So we will have a little bit longer show today. Obviously, we have to talk about the Twins. We typically do not do that on our Thursday show, but if you've been paying attention, their season is over, so we'll do a quick recap to that and talk about how the Twins just did a Twins thing. So,
Yeah.
so we'll do that first. We'll start it off with a Thursday question, and then we'll do that, and then we'll get into Viking stuff per standard, and then we'll do the skull scale, our picks for the week, our gambling lock of the week, and if we have any time after that, we'll see what happens. But that is the game plan for today. So let's hop right into it with the Thursday question. And like I said, this is going to be a bit of a the game plan is to try to squeeze this into like 60 minutes here, but if we go a little bit longer, that's not a problem. So it's going to be a little bit of a less open-ended Thursday question today, so we don't spend as much time talking
Sure.
about nothing. My question today is, and I don't think there is certainly room for debate here, and I'm willing to listen to a lot of answers, but I think there's really only 3 or 4 plausible answers here. So here's my question. Where is the best place to get fast food fries? So, which fast food establishment has the best
Easy.
French fries in your opinion?
Arby's. The curly fries.
That's what
specifically.
I thought for sure you'd say McDonald's or BK.
That was my first thought, but then I kind of recently had Arby's, and
Okay.
I went in, and I love them. I love them so
Arby's
much.
curly fries are better than McDonald's standard
Yes.
fries or whatever you
Yes.
call them.
McDonald's standard fries are very good.
I
Very,
agree.
but the curly fries are.
So I started like, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago. I stopped going to fast food places. I don't consider Chipotle to be a fast food place for what it's worth, but I stopped doing fast food, and the biggest thing, like the hardest fast food for me to cut out has been Arby's curly fries because they cost like $2 and they taste fantastic. So let us know if you disagree with. I can't. I'm honestly very shocked that you picked Arby's. I thought that was kind of like the dark horse answer there. But let us know on our Twitter account if you disagree or if you have a strong opinion one way or the other. I remember when I was growing up, this was a heated debate between parents on where they were going to take us after games because some people hated like Culver's, for example, and some people didn't want to pay for Arby's, and then McDonald's was
I
kind
gotta
of the
say,
default.
crinkle cut fries are so not.
So like White
They're
Castle,
very overrated.
White Castle
They're very
fries?
overrated, like the Culver's ones.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they're
yeah.
super overrated.
Yeah,
to me.
I'm not a fan of those either. Also, sweet potato fries, straight trash. Like not good at all. So there are our French fry takes for the day. So let's talk about the Twins. Like I
Yeah,
said,
let's.
I was at the game. Fly, sorry. I was at the game on Monday. Obviously, very disappointing. And then the 2 games in New York did not pan out too well either. Twins ultimately get swept 3-0. They have lost, I believe, 16 straight games in a row now in the postseason, and 13 of those to the Yankees, or 12 and 15. They've lost a lot of games in the postseason, and it's pretty much to the Yankees. So, my biggest takeaway here is it was obviously very disappointing, but sort of to be expected too. Like as that series drew on, when the Twins didn't win that first game, a game that I thought they definitely had a chance to win, and really they were kind of in the driver's seat of that first opening game in New York. When they didn't win that game, I kind of felt like they were getting swept. That was where.
Yeah.
That was when the series sort of ended to me. When they start off, Jorge Polanco hits a bomb, and I think they referenced this on Score North, where it's like when he hits that home run, you kind of expect like, okay, this series is going to be 10-9 for 5 games or whatever, and then the Twins only score 6 more runs after that home run that Polanco hit in the
Yeah,
first
I guess
inning
you're right.
against New York. So super disappointing, very deflating. What are your major takeaways from this Twin series?
Kind of what you said. in the last time we talked about the Twins, you sort of
I was optimistic going into that series.
You sort of convinced me that they were gonna stick with them, and I believed it. I mean, you made good points, and I don't know. It's just the Yankees and the Twins. My whole perception, the whole regular season, when the Twins started to kind of emerge as a contender, and they were hitting all these bombs, and
right.
They were gaining a reputation as a playoff contender and a playoff team. My first thought right away was, they're going to lose to the Yankees. They're going to get swept by the Yankees, because that's all I know as a Twins fan, and it
right.
carried out exactly as I thought. And it was Didi Gregorius doing a lot of the damage, as I would have expected. Like, that grand slam in Game 2 was like just vintage Twins Yankees playoffs to me. So, I have no other thoughts other than this team's. I think there's obviously a lot of good to take away from the year, and there's clearly a kind of a list of to-dos to improve and what needs to improve. But
right.
Definitely a step forward overall. It's just next year, if they get matched up with the Yankees again in the playoffs, I'm going to assume the same thing's going to happen.
So I want to point out a couple of things here. The first thing, so everyone moans on, and I just did it. So I'm not blaming anyone or saying that I don't do this, but everyone talks about Twins always losing to the Yankees in the playoffs, right? Like it's especially if you're in your age range to my age range, like somewhere in that 20 to 30 range. Pretty much all you've seen your entire life is the Twins getting shut down by the Yankees. The only excitement that you have is when the Twins beat the Moneyball A's, only to get absolutely destroyed by the Angels in 2003, I want to say. 2002, I think it was 2002 or 2003, one of the two. And other than that, it's been straight Yankees, basically, since you've been watching Twins baseball coherently. So I fully understand.
Also, I don't know if you're paying attention to this. I'm going to interrupt you, but the Cardinals are beating the Braves 10-0 in the first inning right now.
Yeah, I just saw that before we hopped on. Yeah, Atlanta is cursed just like Minnesota, straight up.
Yeah.
They kind of are.
A little bit.
And the only time we went head-to-head, though, Minnesota won. But, the point that I want to raise here about the Yankees is that, so, yes, the Yankees kick the shit out of the Twins every time they play each other in the postseason. But has there ever been a time when the Yankees weren't the better team heading into the series? Like, honest to God. Like, if you are looking at this objectively speaking, and from every single series, so 2002, 2003, I think they skipped one, and then 2004, 2007, 2008, and 2009, 2014. I believe those are the years. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Has there ever been a time when you genuinely thought, okay, the Twins are the better baseball team heading into this series? And I think the answer to that question is no. Right.
No.
The answer is always no. And so now that brings me to the second complaint, to the payroll issue, which has been an issue, obviously, for a couple decades now. It was, heightened by the Billy Beane Moneyball ordeal, where you literally saw the figures on the screen and kind of got a better idea of what some of these small ball teams or small market teams are working with. Now, the Twins aren't necessarily a small market team, but they are definitely a medium market team, and in no way, shape, or form anywhere close to the payrolls of the Dodgers, Red Sox, Yankees, etc. So they're at an inherent disadvantage. So you can complain about that, and I will complain right with you, because that's bogus, and I think that you need to have a salary cap in every sport just to even the playing field for the teams like Jacksonville, for example, who don't draw dick for fans in the NFL and would have no shot at signing anyone without a salary cap if the NFL didn't have a salary cap. So I'm with you on that argument. The other thing is that the Twins literally went into the postseason as a team that pretty much didn't have a postseason roster anymore after the injuries and suspensions. So you go, like, my theory going in was the Twins could, and this is the argument that I made on our last show, was that the Twins were going to win this series if they hit. Only if they hit, because they could match the Yankees pitcher for pitcher, basically. And I think they did in games 1 and 3 with Odorizzi and Barrios. Game 2 didn't exactly work out too well for Randy Dobnak, but in those two games, the two games that they were in, the two games that, honestly, game 1 they probably should have won. And game 3 they had, I think when I left the game, we were complaining about how they left 10 guys on base.
Well, how
Mostly,
many hard hit balls went right to a Yankee
there was the
fielder
one
in that game? It was over every inning. It seemed like
it
there
was
was
to
just
right
a ball that
field
was
to
just smacked right into a glove.
Judge took a couple extra hits away, and extra base hits away, and let's keep in mind that he is by no means an excellent fielder. He is a
Rosario
guy out there.
had that single in the hole that should have. I mean, great play, obviously. But,
yeah, he played the wall really well. I'll give him that, but he's by no means a great fielder. And then you've got, you had the one with Gregorius that essentially, ended the season. And I saw a lot of people say this, but I'm going to say it too because I completely agree, where it just kind of encompassed everything in the series. It was like the singular moment, that diving catch by Didi Gregorius up the middle on a hard hit ball by, I believe it was Polanco.
Yeah, I think so.
The Twins had a lot of tough luck heading into this series. They had a lot of tough luck against the Yankees throughout history. I just don't like it. And then they didn't hit. Like, that's the one thing that the Twins, on paper, and by the slimmest of margins, mind you, had an opportunity.
Like,
to
I don't know. I'm not a baseball expert by any means, the way you are, but like, it seemed like there were a lot of hanging pitches from the Yankees that were there for the taking for, hitters like the Twins have, and it seemed like they were swinging through them way more often than, the few times I did watch during regular season where they would kind of take advantage of those ones. That was just initial impression from watching.
So the greatest indication of that is when, and baseball people know this, that, when you see a hitter foul a pitch straight back, it typically means that they missed that ball by anywhere between, a centimeter and an inch. And it would have gone a lot further, and the angle, the launch angle and all that, bat speed and whatnot, would have directed that ball into a completely different path had the bat just came around, a fraction of an inch different. And the Twins seem to do that quite a bit. Miguel Sano being the biggest culprit of them all in that regard. There were so many times when I thought that Sano was right on a pitch, only to see him miss it. And my worst fears came true with Sano during that series, where he kept having to face these power arm pitchers that have nasty breaking stuff. Is there anyone on the planet who thought Sano had a chance against Aroldis Chapman? I don't think. Is there? Because he's
best chance was Chapman throwing 4 balls in a row or something.
Right. He's like, I'm a Sano defender. I still think that he's a great player, and by player I mean he's a great hitter. He's a terrible everything else, but I still believe in him. But he does not make contact against deep like relief pitchers that are setup men and closers are not for Miguel Sano. That's why it was so fantastic when he hit that walk-off home run, because it just doesn't happen that much. And yeah, the Twins were just straight up outmatched. So I wasn't even that mad about it. Like, I remember we were leaving the stadium, and you've always got the couple fans who are swearing and kind of making fools out of themselves, and yelling at Yankees fans and doing all that stuff. But I was talking to my dad walking out of the game, and I was like, did you expect anything less? And he was like, absolutely not. Like, we have been, my dad and I have been to every single Twins home postseason game since I've been alive. And every single time we leave, it makes complete sense why it went down. I mean, the Twins left 10 guys on base in Game 3. Every single hard hit ball they had, as you mentioned, seemed to find a glove. Odorizzi actually pitched really well. If you told me that Odorizzi was only going to allow 3 runs over 6 innings, I believe is what it was, I'd say that the Twins had a really good chance to win that game. They didn't show up to they didn't hit the ball. It just didn't happen for them. Like, period. And when they did, it was solo home runs.
And there's no reason to believe that it will change, until. There's no reason to believe that'll change unless they play somebody other than the Yankees. That's my mindset right now.
Yeah, and I don't really buy into the curse aspect of it. I'm just saying, literally every single time the Twins have played the Yankees are the better baseball team.
It's not really close either.
It's not. Look at that lineup. If you looked at that lineup, on let's say the Monday night lineup, Yankees versus Twins, there were probably 3 guys in the Twins lineup that I would consider to either be all-stars or have all-star potential, meaning Nelson Cruz, Max Kepler, and Jorge Polanco. I think Eddie Rosario is a fringe all-star. I think he's more a starter in the MLB than a true all-star. 3 guys, and then you could throw in Mitch Garver if he played a full-time role. those are the guys in the Twins lineup who are truly stud baseball players. Look at the Yankees lineup. Their first 4 hitters are probably are guys that are winning batting titles. DJ LeMahieu had the best season of his entire career, and he's continuing to have a very good season. Mike Stanton and Aaron Judge, who literally both haven't even played that much this year, which should tell you everything about the fact that they scored still won 106 games.
They hit 306 home runs, one shy of the record, and they had Judge and Stanton for 40 games
combined,
for the season total.
Combined, yeah.
Yeah.
And so those are 2 guys that are perennial all-stars when they're healthy, and probably guys that will get Hall of Fame votes someday. And then, you look at the rest of that lineup. I mean, Didi Gregorius was a top prospect in the Arizona organization. The Yankees have taken literally they have a tremendous lineup, and then they threw out Severino in Game 3, who, he's a top prospect who was rehabbing an injury all year and ended up coming back, and it looks like his stuff is back and he's as good as ever. But and Odorizzi was a first-time All-Star this year, a mid-tier prospect, a guy who is never expected to be a big-game starter, and he is the finest pitcher the Twins have right now. And by right now, I mean as of Monday, because they technically do not have him under contract right now. So that's the situation you were looking at. I mean, what did you expect? That's just where I'm at with that. It's like if the Twins had won, and I think they could have had they hit the ball, great. But if you look at those teams on paper 15 years from now, you're going to say to yourself, how do the Twins even win 101 games? I promise you. 10 years from now, look at that lineup. You'll see one guy who didn't get into the Hall of Fame because of steroids, and a bunch of other guys who are talented. I mean, I don't want to diminish the talent on the Twins roster, because I think they have a lot of room to continue to improve, and they have some very good players. But there are no Hall of Famers on this team. The Yankees are flooded with them. Just on paper, objectively speaking, you're not a Twins fan without bias. The Yankees are the better team, and they always have been. Always. With the exception to, there was one year in 2009 when the Twins had a legitimate shot, and they lost Francisco Liriano for the rest of the season with Tommy John's injury. Whatever the hell that is on your shoulder. I don't even know. So that's what we're looking at. That's the uphill battle. And to me, it's not a curse. It's not a curse. It's just
kind of goes back to your, payroll thing too. You could insert that into this argument as well. But
yeah, I mean, no one wants to. No, it's the easy argument, so no one wants to have it, and it's the Yankees fans will just say boo hoo, whatever. That's an excuse. Well, it's also there are some facts there too. I mean, I understand the grief of Twins fans. Now, heading into the offseason, this is a strong enough overall team. Again, there's not much star power here. I don't think, at least not yet. But this is a strong enough overall team that if you add 1 or 2 pitchers, and I'm talking maybe you probably are going to need to get a frontline starter. I don't necessarily mean go get Garrett Cole, because I don't see that as realistic for the Twins. But if you get a frontline starter and then a mid-tier guy, the name that always comes into my head when I think of an average pitcher is Rick Porcello, and he also happens to be a free agent this year. So those are 2 names right there, and I haven't spent any time looking at the free agency wire or whatever. But the Twins are in a great position. They won probably 30 games more than most fans thought they were going to this year, which is exceptional. They broke basically every hitting record in their book for the most part. They shattered a couple MLB records. It's a great season overall. It was a ton of fun. I mean, I spent hours watching Twins baseball this year. Hours. Realistically, I probably spent over 400 hours watching Twins baseball this year, and I have no shame in that whatsoever. It was a great season, and it was a lot of fun. It sucks the way that it ended, but I can't expect much less until they get a better overall team. I mean, I was wrong to be optimistic. Yeah. Straight up. That's just... There was no reason. That's just
summing up Minnesota sports right there.
It really is
wrong to be optimistic.
Straight up, that's where it is. So, I mean, we will talk more about the Twins as we head into the offseason here. It sounds like Falvey and Levine are planning to make at least a couple of impact moves.
They said they want to be aggressive, so
which is great. and they have, I believe they have at least $60 million in payroll based off an $135 million cap. Obviously, they can go higher than that, but the Twins typically, and I don't expect them to. They do not go above that number, but they have plenty of money to spend and only a few guys that they really need to retain. And some guys they don't really even need to retain. I would love to see Sergio Romo come back, for example. I would love to see Odorizzi come back. But there are some guys like Michael Pineda. I'm good. I'm good there. Don't need to see him come back. I truly blame a lot of the way this postseason went on Michael Pineda and his decision to be a moron and cheat, and I'm not accepting of cheaters at all either. So we've been over that, but that's kind of where I'm at with the Twins right now. And we'll get in, like I said, we'll get deeper into kind of the moves that they could potentially make, and hopefully there will be some discussion to have. The hot stove is always pretty fun, so we'll get into that as the offseason progresses. The Wild are playing hockey now, by the way. I'm not going to talk about it yet because they are absolutely brutal. But at some point, we'll talk about the Wild, too. But for now, I guess we're going to stick to football because the Vikings are back to being a winning team. And I think that's probably a good segue into the Skol scale. And we can talk a little bit about where our optimism stands. So why don't you tell me? We didn't have a post-game episode this week. So why don't you tell me kind of your sentiment coming off of that New York Giants win?
Yeah. So, I actually picked the Giants to win that game. Yeah, people remember, and that was mostly because I just didn't think the Vikings or Kirk Cousins or this offense would ever show up on the road, and I was proved wrong. So for me, this is actually kind of a big win. And I know people are going to look at this and say, well, they're playing the Giants, no Barkley. It's not that big a deal. Like, they should have went in there and taken care of their business, which they did. But on the road, on a team, for what it's worth, that had 2 wins in a row, I think this should be a confidence booster and potentially one that kind of can maybe sort of flip the script for the rest of the season. So Skol skill-wise, I think I was 5.2 last week. I'm going to go up to 6.7 because they have that win on the road, and they look like they could, they look like a team that could beat other teams on the road besides just bottom dwellers. So big performance from Kirk, big performance from the offense. I had a lot of positive vibes from that one.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. So I believe I was sitting at like a 5.5 last time we did this. I'm not going to jump up a whole lot, but I will jump to 6.5 for a couple of reasons. I think that was one of the better overall games that the Vikings have played in a very long time, in terms of offense, defense, special teams. Pretty much everything was clicking. Now, there were a couple of drives that stalled because of penalties and whatnot. There are things that you can nitpick, but as a whole, if you score 28 points the hard way, nevertheless, and you get a good performance out of your running back, you get a great performance out of Dalvin Cook if you exclude the red zone fumble and the other fumble that really nobody saw, by the way. I didn't even know they had 2 fumbles until I looked at the box score the next day. And then your wide receiver 2, who was unhappy going into the week, got his 3 catches, and really that's kind of a standard stat line for a number 3 receiver, by the way, or number 2 receiver, by the way. Diggs may not like to hear that, but 45 yards out of your number 2 and 120 out of your number 1 seems to be about standard for league wide for that role. So the offense was clicking. Cousins made a couple of really nice throws. He was consistent throughout the game. He showed a lot of things that we haven't seen in the 2 important games this year, which was nice to see. But obviously, until he does that against a team like Philadelphia, for example, it's hard to be more optimistic than we are. I'm with you that it was a big win, but it's not that important of a win.
I thought it was a must-win game. I said that on the last show. I don't know if you didn't agree with that.
I don't agree with must win, but I do think that for the mental health of this football team, getting a win in New York was absolutely critical. And they went out and they did it, and they did it very well. The defense played exceptional. The one black mark on that game was the deep pass to Slayton, which Rhodes is getting beaten by Slayton now. Like that's not a great sign for where Rhodes is at in his career. But we can talk about that another time. That's really the only thing that I had a problem with. And honestly, that took a perfect throw to happen. He shouldn't have been open in the first place, but Daniel Jones threw that ball great, and that was the one time that the Giants looked like they had any momentum in that game. The rest of it was completely deflating. So that all leads up to a 6.5 rating for me for my optimism, my Skol scale, and that. But what I will say about that is that this weekend's game against Philadelphia has the potential to, send that through the roof again. Because, like I just said, I loved the way that the Vikings played last Sunday, but I just want to see them do it against a quality opponent. I don't consider New York to be a quality opponent, like most people don't.
See, I'm gonna a win against the Eagles will do a lot less for me than the game against the Giants will.
Why is that?
Again, it's just this whole home road thing. Because the first 4 weeks of the year, it was, at home Vikings completely dominated. Right. And again, it was the Falcons and the Raiders. But for what it's worth, Oakland has now gone into Indianapolis and won by a couple scores, and then they beat Chicago. So they look like a formidable team now. But the Vikings have drilled both of them, and it's been over by halftime in both games. So I know how good they are at home. Like I still, from the beginning, I've said that they can beat anybody at home.
Right. It's
about how they show up on the road. And this game against the Giants, again, while it is against the Giants, they finally showed up and looked like a playoff team. Really, like they took care of business and they dominated on both sides, and everything was efficient. So,
do you take anything from Kirk Cousins saying on his podcast, radio show, whatever, that he kind of flipped a switch and was pissed off, and that's what made him play better? By the way, I just want to make this point real quick before you answer. When people say ticked off, that is the dumbest shit ever. Just say pissed off. Like, we know what you're saying. Or if you say bleep, like, don't say bleep. Like, either swear or don't swear. I don't care, but like, don't insult my intelligence with that. All right. Do you take anything away from Cousins being pissed off about and saying that kind of boosted his
I really don't.
So
it's kind of one of those things. Like, he should have sort of that mentality every game. Like that, I feel like that's what the great ones have. Like, you can kind of tell Tom Brady's got that like pissed off like
he's just,
mentality.
That's like how he is as a human being.
Right.
Yeah,
and Kirk's not that, and I think that maybe that's a large reason why he's kind of struggled against better opponents.
Which is why I think this is important. That's why I bring up this point, because
that's what I'm saying. I don't expect that to actually change. Right? Like, I don't. If he's flipped the switch now, like, I don't think you could flip it now 7 years into your career, but maybe he'll prove me wrong.
I'm with you, and I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to. I'm going to stay consistent with this point. I don't like judging the mental aspect.
Plus, it's on a radio show, and that's the team is sort of putting on. What's said on there, I don't think has a lot of merit. But that's just.
The only reason I bring that up is that I do like you said, like, there are some quarterbacks that have that mentality, right? Like that, and I can't even comprehend what it must be like to kind of have that killer instinct, that it factor, if you will, where like you said, and I completely agree. Kirk Cousins does not seem to have that it factor, that killer instinct, whatever you want to call it. But if he can get, I do buy into, if you're in the right headspace, that you tend to perform doing certain, like, if you're in the right headspace for a specific activity, you tend to perform better, right? Like when I'm at work and I'm really...
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. I fully agree with that. I just don't know how much weight I put into him saying this on his radio show or his podcast, that, like, the team is, sponsoring, I suppose. Like,
So do you think it's more to give fans, like, something, as opposed to being...
I think that's more the motive, or that's more valid than saying that he's actually, dug deep down and had an epiphany. He said, "Okay, I'm pissed off now." Like,
for what it's worth, he is a very religious guy, so maybe he did have an epiphany.
Maybe he did. Maybe I who knows?
Is this something worth monitoring, or is this something? No. Okay, fair enough. I'm with you.
Here's the thing: if the Vikings run the table and Kirk just lights it up and plays like an MVP the rest of the season, we'll come back to this show. We'll pick out the video, this portion of the show, and put it on the internet and say, here's Drew Mahowald being wrong about Kirk Cousins.
and I don't think either of us would have or anyone listening to this would have a problem
No,
with that either.
no.
But yeah, I'm with you. I do. I think there's a lot more talk. Like I was thinking about this, that in general, people talk a lot more than they need to. That sounds kind of. That doesn't. I don't know how much. When the way that people talk, they always say like, "Okay, I think this. This is how I act. This is what I'm gonna do." And then a lot of the time,
Talk more than walk the walk.
right? Like 75% of what you say is like for example, I woke up this morning and I said I'm going to go to the gym, but then
People think more highly of themselves than they generally are actually perceived.
And that's true, but people also say like I woke up this morning, I told myself I was going to go to the gym. The second that you said, "Hey, can you record earlier than we normally do?" I was like, "Nope, screw the gym, I'm out." Like, and I think that people just kind of like, the more you talk, the more you Baker Mayfield is obviously the perfect catalyst for this. The more you talk, the more you're setting yourself up for someone to talk back. And I just think that I definitely would love to see Kirk have some killer to him. You like that Kirk is a Kirk that I like considerably more than spiritual. What's the
he
word?
Can be spiritual. That's fine.
No. I paused the wrong time there. What I meant is like the spiritual, like uplifting, like morale boosting, like that social media presence. Like the person I'm talking about, the guy that gets on social media and like the reason he's on social media is to give you advice about your life and how to better.
Okay.
That guy.
Okay, yeah.
That's who Kirk is to me. That's his person. That's his persona. It's not a person I like hanging out with. It's definitely not someone I want to go to the bar with. You like that Kirk. The guy that's kind of got
fired up about certain things.
He's just kind of he's got
weird tics.
Yeah, and he's got a little bit more personality. He's got some more. It seems like he has more confidence. He seems to be. I like loudmouths just in general. Like I like Baker Mayfield. I like Richard Sherman, which is why it's so funny to see them be going head to head right now. But like, I like people like that more than I like the calm guy who is just like, don't forget to wake up early because you can get more work done. Like, I don't care about that guy. Like, that guy pisses me off because it's not doing anything for me, and you're doing it for yourself for likes on Instagram, and it's dumb as hell. Like, we don't need that person ever. So, I would like...
Great
I like confident Kirk.
From BJ Reidell right here. We should...
Hey, that's what social media has become, and it pisses me off. So, anyways, that I would like to see Kirk play with some edge, and if he's going to play with some edge, this is definitely a great opponent to do it with. Given that Vikings fans do not like Eagles fans, they're terrible people. We love to see the Vikings beat the Eagles just in general because of what happened in the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago. There is all the reason in the world for him to play with some edge this game. And they're coming off, obviously, a great win in New York. You're playing against an opponent that he has played with throughout his career, given that he spent most of his time in Washington and was in the NFC East. A lot of things kind of match up for Kirk to go into this game ticked off, as he likes to say. Ticked off. So let's break this one down. Starting with, this will be kind of a shorter preview than we normally do, but we'll go through the key matchups and positions here. Start with the quarterback. Carson Wentz is the leader for Philadelphia now. Nick Foles obviously is in Jacksonville, and the franchise guy is back behind center. What do you think of Carson Wentz? Is he the thing about? Okay, this is my question. I have to kind of explain it briefly. That Carson Wentz has been two guys throughout his career. He's been this guy that looks like an MVP player, and he is also a guy that spends time on, injured reserve, injury prone in general, and kind of comes back and does not quite play at the same level. So is he coming into this week? Which Carson Wentz do you expect to see?
Well, Carson Wentz has actually exceeded my expectations throughout his career, like a lot compared to kind of what I thought he would be. I thought he was a little bit overrated as a prospect. I was really surprised that he rose up that much.
Probably worth noting that you're from South Dakota, though.
Huh?
Probably worth noting that you're from South Dakota.
Maybe it's okay. I don't know. It's maybe a relevant piece of information, but he's gutsy and he's tough, and I think he's a winner, which those are really respectable things to me, and I think those are the type of things that and he rises to the moment, I think. So in that perspective, I would definitely rather have him than Kirk for instance. But I do think he can get in trouble and forcing things and whatnot, which I think like when the moment's big, he tries to do a ton for his team, which sometimes does get him in trouble. But I think like Kirk has the opposite problem, where like he kind of reserves himself and tries to do as little as possible and check it down too much, whereas Carson will maybe take those chances down the field. So, I think he is prone to some mistakes there, but like I said, he'll make a lot of plays with his feet, and the Vikings will probably have to keep an eye on him there. But, I would say he's definitely upper echelon in the NFL, probably top 12 or so quarterback.
I think that's a good place to put him right there, like
on that 10 to 12, something like that.
Right on that line, because he's like. I do consider Carson Wentz to be a franchise quarterback. I think he's a guy that you can build around. Obviously, the Eagles have, and they've done. Honestly, he's really got one of the best situations like around. Now, Alshon Jeffrey has not necessarily panned out maybe as well as they thought he would when he signed that big contract instead of coming to Minnesota. By the way, but I do think that Howie Roseman, one of the top executives in all the NFL, has put so many great pieces where it's kind of hard to know how good Carson Wentz truly is because of how great the pieces are around him. Now, obviously, you need to have a certain level of greatness in order to do anything ever with the pieces that are put in place for you. But he is in a great situation, and he clearly can throw the football well. He's big body. It's tough to bring down. The toughness thing I think is very real. People say like the Midwest toughness thing, which I don't buy because I'm soft as hell.
Well, he's just he puts himself in harm's way quite a bit too, just the way he plays. I think he plays through a lot of injuries that aren't really. This is kind of more of an opinion than anything, but I think he plays through a lot of injuries that aren't really noted or made public, which is why I respect his toughness quite a bit. Kind of because of that, he'll if it's 3rd and 7, he'll dive through 3 defenders to get that first down, for example. Right. Like he'll do those type of things.
He's a gamer.
He's a gamer. That's a good way to put it. So and that's kind of separating himself from kind of what you're talking about with his situation and being Doug Peterson is calling the plays and calling the shots, which is a really a big benefit for him, making things easier for him with the RPOs and whatnot. But at the skill positions, you have Zach Ertz, one of the top 2-3 receiving tight ends in the NFL. Deshaun Jackson's there, which I think he should be healthy.
He's officially out.
Officially out? Okay, well, that's a big boost because I think the Vikings are susceptible to a big play from him. But Alshon, a big body guy who has given the Vikings problems in the past. And then I think Dallas Goedert, too. I'm a South Dakota guy, so... but yeah, he's relevant because we mentioned every show how the Vikings with tight ends sometimes struggle, and whether it's Ertz or Dallas Goedert, one of those guys might slip away for a big gain or two. So I'm not worried about their running game as much. Whether it's Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, I don't think those guys are too dangerous. But the Eagles' offense, as we saw against the Packers a couple weeks ago on Thursday night, they're capable of big plays. And Carson Wentz is able to make those kind of weird, scramble out and create a first down out of nothing type of thing. So it's going to take some discipline from the Vikings defense, but I think they can do it.
So this team, to me, this is going to be a weird comparison, but it sort of reminds me of how the Twins are put together. Their offense, at least. There is a Hall of Famer on their offensive line in Jason Peters, but with exception to him, this is just a lot of good players to me. I think that Zach Ertz is probably close to top of his position as well. But for the most part here, you're looking at a lot of guys who are just as a cohesive unit, this offense is just very, very good. Like Jordan Howard. Yeah. Jordan Howard isn't going to – he's not going to be an all-pro. Probably ever in the NFL. But he is one of the toughest runners in the entire NFL. The Vikings remember him well from when he was a Chicago Bear, and he gave him fits in terms of broken tackles because he's just a guy that keeps those legs moving forward. He's a tough runner. He's not an evasive runner by any means. That's Miles Sanders' job generally, and he has not been much. He hasn't been that effective. Yeah, he has not been much of a difference maker. Jordan Howard, on the other hand, runs between the tackles, very well, and has been dangerous in that regard. You saw the 3 touchdown game he is a guy that can do damage like that. But as a whole, like this group is like, yes, there are a couple of Pro Bowlers here. Like Deshaun Jackson has been a Pro Bowler. Alshon Jeffrey has been a Pro Bowler. Like I said, Peters is probably going to be a Hall of Famer someday. Jason Kelsey is a very talented player. Lane Johnson is one of the most athletic human beings on the entire planet. Just look, if you want to have some fun. And by fun, I mean if you're a football nerd and enjoy just looking at the athleticism and how that translates to the field. Lane Johnson is a case study in that regard. Look at his mock draftable profile if you have the chance. He's just off the charts athletic and is basically the pinnacle. Or that's not the right word. He's the epitome of what I would want in a right tackle. But the rest of these guys they're just quality players. They're just like Dallas Goedert, just a very quality player. He catches the ball effectively. He does his job well. He could do everything as a tight end. Alshon Jeffrey, no longer an elite wide receiver in the NFL, but he can still go up and get the ball, especially one-on-one coverage. I do think that Xavier Rhodes matches up extremely well with him, and really I think the first breakout game that we ever saw from Xavier Rhodes was against Alshon Jeffrey when he was playing for the Chicago Bears, because as we've seen, Xavier tends to do better against these big body wide receivers as opposed to the smaller, shiftier guys that line up in the slot. Really, Nelson Aguilar is probably a bigger threat in my mind than Alshon Jeffrey, just because of the style of football that he plays and the way that Rhodes has been playing, and it seems like he's having some trouble over the last few weeks here. But I think that Jeffrey has the potential to be a get-right matchup for Rhodes, just because of the way he plays football, and he can match up with them in terms of his size and his speed, and he can be physical with them at the line of scrimmage, knock him off his route. The offensive line really is like kind of the catalyst of this offense, what kind of makes it go. I do think that this has the potential to be a problem for Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin, because of how good Peters and Johnson are. And then up the middle, Jason Kelsey is also very good. I don't consider him to be a top center in the NFL, but he's right there, and he has been in the past. Le'Veon Joseph will have to have an effective performance in order to get by him and do some actual damage. But you look at the two guards, and that's where I think they might be a little bit vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Brandon Brooks is good. He's not a bad player by any means, but Isaac Sumalo is probably the weakest link here. That's the left guard for the Eagles, so I would keep an eye on that spot specifically if you're someone who likes to watch pass rushing when you're watching an NFL game, because I think the interior can get by Isaac Sumalo. He's going to be the one that gets help, and really he's the only I do not expect to see let's put it this way. I do not expect to see the Eagles rush the ball through the A and B gap on the left side of the field, because I think they much rather move guys with Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks than Peters and Sumalo. Whereas Peters is better as a pass protector. That's who he's been his entire career. So that's kind of the overview that I have on this offense, and I think that we probably didn't mention Zach Ertz enough here. He's a very dangerous weapon and a guy that ends up catching 6 to 8 balls seemingly every single week. And the the Vikings have problems with tight ends in general. So I guess I would keep an eye on him as well. And I don't know how they're going to match up with him, because what I expected last week in terms of coverage of the tight end was not what we got. Yeah. The Vikings ended up lining up a cornerback on the tight end for the most part last week. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle Ertz, because they actually did a pretty good job against Evan Ingram, who had been through 4 weeks arguably the best tight end in the NFL in terms of statistical output.
Yeah, definitely.
So that is what we're looking at here on offense. I don't expect Corey Clement or Darren Sproles to play a role here. Josh McCown is still in the NFL, if you want to note that. And the Big V, by the way, a guy that we had a lot of fun with on a show a couple of years ago.
The Big V.
The Big V is still on this team, but he is now a backup. And their first-round pick, Andre Dillard, isn't playing yet, and then J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has not done a whole lot yet either. So I think that is about where we stand on offense. So moving over to the defensive side of the ball, I think that this has the potential to be the reason why the Vikings lose the game right here. This front four plus.
Yeah, the front four. The Eagles defense is very interesting because they got a couple levels of dominant. Like, they're very dominant up front, and then they kind of don't have really anything, to write home about in the secondary. But up front, they are very, very good.
Yeah, that defensive line, they're going to be running a 4-3 front. I believe this is still Jim Schwartz. Yes, so it is. It is still Jim Schwartz. So expect. I honestly, if he wasn't the former head coach of the Detroit Lions or the defensive coordinator of the Eagles, two teams that I am not a fan of, I would be much bigger fan of Jim Schwartz because I love the way he coaches football. And I think that he's a loudmouth asshole, which I also think is pretty funny generally from a entertainment standpoint.
Remember the handshake thing with Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah,
that was great.
Just two hard, stubborn people.
Yeah,
it's perfect. It's great TV, and he runs a very, very aggressive defensive scheme, which is a lot of fun if you're a fan of that team. Now, does that leave you susceptible to the big play? Absolutely. But this pass rush generally makes him look pretty good when he tries to be aggressive. The starting front four here, Derek Barnett coming out of Tennessee is a former first-round pick. You got Timmy. He goes by Tim now. Smart move by him. Tim Jernigan, who I believe is healthy now. Imagine being known as Timmy as an adult, by the way.
Especially someone that looks like him, like a big, humongous person.
And then you've got all-pro, superstar, stud Fletcher Cox, who is going to be a problem.
Yep.
He can break this game based off of how Pat Elflein and Garrett Bradbury have played specifically in pass protection. And then you've
Brandon
got
Graham, too.
Maybe the most underrated pass rusher in the NFL. Had 3
He's been underrated
sacks.
for a long time, too.
Why? Like how? I think we said it the last time we talked about the Eagles.
We said it in 2016.
Yeah.
So the 2016 was when
Vikings
started 5-0. Vikings started 5-0, and then they went to Philly and lost their first game of the season. And Brandon Graham had like 3 sacks in that game, forced a fumble, like all this stuff. And for some reason, people still haven't recognized that he's an absolute stud.
He's never been given the credit that he is due. He will get that on this podcast. He is a prolific pass rusher. He's an excellent run defender as well. He does it all at the end position. He's getting a little bit older, but clearly he's still doing damage. He's incredible. And I think that the point that you made earlier about this front four is that they make up for a lot of the mistakes that their linebackers and their secondary make because they can get to the quarterback so quickly. They force either a lot of quick throws or they get to the quarterback before they can go deep and exploit the secondary. At the second level of their defense, Nigel Bradham, Zach Brown, and a guy who I've never heard of before is listed as the outside linebacker on this depth chart. That's Kamu Gruger-Hill, who I don't know who he is.
You should also take note of Nathan Gary. He's actually, I know about him because he was from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, graduated with, I think, a year older than my grade, but played at Nebraska as a safety and has converted to linebacker or like a money backer type thing in the NFL. Since with the Eagles, I think he was a 6th-round pick maybe. He had a touchdown last week, I believe, against the Jets. So he'll kind of play mostly linebacker up towards line of scrimmage, but he does have a safety back as well, yeah.
They just got Duke Riley from Atlanta, too. I don't expect him to figure in much, but just keep that in mind. Duke Riley out of LSU, he's a linebacker that I thought would fit really well in the Viking system when he was coming out and I was doing more draft stuff. But overall, this linebacker crew is not – if you get to the second level, you could do some damage. I think that Bradham is probably the most effective player here, but he's mainly just a tackler. And then you go to the secondary.
In the secondary, you got a couple of names that Vikings fans will remember. Andrew Sendejo and Craig James. A couple of guys that actually they had a big impact in the Packers game.
Yep.
Craig James had the deflection that won the game with the interception. But, overall, this secondary is very vulnerable. There's guys – well, I know Darby's hurt, I believe, still. Vontae Maddox is still hurt. He was the one that got the concussion from the Sendejo hit in that game, where Sendejo just crushed Maddox right in the head. And Vikings fans are like, "Yep, that's Andrew Sendejo."
Yep.
But then you have Cindy Jones might play. I think he's out of Washington, been in the league a couple years now. Craig James will probably get a lot of reps then, I would assume. So. That's kind of what you're looking at. He was not a roster guy with the Vikings, barely fringe practice squad guy, and with the Eagles right now, he's probably their number 2 or number 3 guy.
So the Eagles secondary is kind of in shambles for a couple of reasons. The first one being that Ronald Darby was their guy, and he's been banged up on and off for, uh, going into last year as well. So he has not been a guy that plays 16 games, but he is their number one cornerback. Coming out of Florida State, he was one of my favorite cover corners, but that's really all he is a cover corner. He's not a great tackler, so keep that in mind if you see him get trucked by Dalvin Cook or either of the angry Vikings wide receivers. Just know that he's not a great tackler, and that's something you can exploit him with. They do have one of the best tacklers in the NFL, though, playing safety, and that's Malcolm Jenkins. He's also one of my favorite people on the planet, an outstanding human being, much more than just a football player. But he is the Philadelphia equivalent of Harrison Smith. He moves all around the formation. He's more of a box safety than a cover safety. He does more damage in terms of being a pass rusher and making tackles for loss and kind of having some fun around the line of scrimmage. That's where he's most dangerous to me, but he's also talented on the back end. And remember, he has a cornerback background, but for whatever reason, he was not that great of a cover guy coming out of OSU, and the Saints moved him to safety. And here we stand. He's one of the better safeties in the NFL. He's really the only guy in the secondary that I would keep that I think is really truly dangerous because he can force fumbles and he also can make plays like all safeties can in terms of stopping the pass. So Darby and Jenkins are the two guys here that can be impact guys. Darby not quite the guy that he used to be.
If Darby plays, I think he's still pretty banged up.
Okay, so that's where he stands. So then you're dealing with Avonte Maddox, who before he got hurt, still not a great player, just kind of a throwaway guy. Sidney Jones, who has not panned out. I'll take the hit there. I thought he was going to be a great cornerback coming out of Washington. He looks a lot like Richard Sherman.
He had the Achilles injury, right?
Yes.
Out of college? Okay.
Which is like the worst thing that can happen to a cornerback.
To a corner.
Yeah. And he looks a lot like Richard Sherman in stature. He does not play like Richard Sherman. So that's kind of where they stand. They also brought in Orlando Scandrick. If he does play, it'll be limited snaps, so I don't see him doing much. And then you've got Rasul Douglas as well out there, who has not panned out much either. So the biggest problem that they have here in their secondary is injuries. The second biggest problem is that their draft picks have not panned out here. So their best player is the guy that they stole from New Orleans and Malcolm Jenkins. And then the other one being Ronald Darby, who they traded for from Buffalo. So they have not done a great job drafting this position, and that's why this group is not very deep, and it's kind of have a bunch of people and players kind of in and out, rotating around, and that's why Anderson Dejo is there. That's kind of where they stand as their secondary. Now, the reason why the secondary can be effective, though, is simply because of that pass rush. Obviously, you guys know as football fans that if the pass rush is getting there in 2.5 seconds, potentially even shorter, the corners don't have to do much in coverage. You can play man and get away with it. You can play
That's
zone.
how the Eagles are going to win on defense.
Exactly.
Probably a few times in this game, considering the Vikings' offensive line and the status there. But, Vikings keep Kirk mildly protected. Give just enough time for Thielen and Diggs to get to the breaks in their routes. They should be fine.
Excellent. So we'll wrap up this breakdown with just give me biggest keys to victory for the Vikings here. Give me one reason why they'd win, one reason why they lose.
One reason why they win, I think it's simply keeping Kirk protected. I mean, I think that's going to be pretty much, I think.
If they stop this defensive line, it looks pretty good.
Yeah. Containing the defensive line, a good performance in the Vikings offensive line. I think they match up pretty well with the rest of the team, or rest of the Eagles roster, Eagles depth chart on both sides. So I think that's just the one main threat, and that could be, that front four for Philly could create some problems, create turnovers. And if Kirk doesn't turn it over or isn't sacked, more than, 2 times or something like that, I think the Vikings should be able to roll.
This is definitely a trenches game. And I think that the one reason why they win, they pass protect effectively. Kirk Cousins has time to throw, and they can exploit the secondary. Now, on the flip side of that, the one reason that they lose, well, it's the same thing. If Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox are raising hell in the backfield, good luck, Kirk Cousins, because we know what happens to Kirk Cousins when he gets pressured, he deflates, and that's what can happen. And on the flip side of that, it's the same thing on defense for the Vikings. Now, if the Vikings can get pressure against this very, very good offensive line, I think that Carson Wentz is a guy that like you said, a little bit more prone to mistakes when he's getting a pass rush and he's looking down
Yeah,
at the pass
he
rush.
like
instead of keeping his eyes upfield.
he goes for the hero play, which is good sometimes and bad other times. So you'll see a lot of good in his highlight tape, but there are a lot of bad too from kind of the risks that he takes doing that. So that's where the Vikings can take advantage potentially and get some turnovers.
So since we're going right into our picks from here, why don't you just go ahead and give me your prediction for this game and give me a point spread, or you can give me a point total, whatever works best for you.
I'll give you a point spread. I think Vikings by 10. I feel pretty good about the Vikings. Vikings at home, coming off of a road win. I feel like they might have found something there. And the Eagles have been very pedestrian this season for the most part, kind of despite that Packers win.
They played the Jets last week. That's why
which doesn't count.
Right.
That the Jets, Dolphins, Redskins, those games don't count.
Right.
So give me the Vikings at home. I'd say by 10.
I'm going to take the Vikings too, but I'm a little bit more wishy-washy about this. I think that Vegas has this one right. They have the Eagles +3. I'll take the Vikings to win by 3 points.
Okay.
I'm going to say I'll say 27-24 is the final here. You know what? 24.
Dan Bailey makes a late field goal.
24-21.
Special teams player of the week, Dan Bailey.
I mean, maybe not. Maybe. 24-21. I'm going to say the first team to get to 24 wins this game because I think both teams are good enough to win games at 21. So if you get to 24, I think that's the difference. And I really think Vegas nailed this one. So let's continue with our picks here then. Starting with the Thursday night football game, which has the potential to
Patriots.
be. Yeah, we don't need
to talk about this one.
Yeah, might just want to turn that one off. Carolina at Tampa Bay is the first one on the slate for Sunday.
I believe it's in London at 8:30 Central.
Is it really? I was super pissed off last week when I woke up and it wasn't football.
I think it's early.
Okay.
They're early London games. So that's
good news.
But I got Tampa because both of those teams are weird. Like Carolina started off awful, and now they're starting to play well. Tampa played terribly last week after the big Rams win. I don't know. I'm picking the Bucs just because it feels like it's they're due for a bounce back performance after the Saints game.
This is a toss-up NFC South matchup, and since it's in London, you're on a neutral field, so there isn't. When I picked this game, I didn't know it was in London. I picked Tampa because of home field. Now I don't have that. I'll take Tampa because I think that they're the more complete team. Whereas if Tampa Bay is able to slow down Christian McCaffrey, it's over.
Which they did last time, by the way.
They did, yeah. And what was the result? Tampa Bay won. So give me Tampa Bay. Moving to Seattle against Cleveland. You got Cleveland in a tough position here. I'm sure that you guys have been hearing about this all week. Cleveland has a tough schedule for the next couple of weeks. That starts with Seattle. They need to make a bounce back here. Baker Mayfield needs this for the media to lay off of him a little bit.
Prior to the Monday night game against the Niners, the Browns were actually favored in this game.
Really?
I would imagine that's not the case now. But I have Seattle in this game because I just can't rely on the Browns anymore.
Yep, I have Seattle too. I am rooting for Cleveland. They are my AFC team of choice, but Seattle I think is kind of underrated and might be a top 5 team in the NFL, and we might be talking about them as a Super Bowl contender by the time this season's over. Mm-hmm. I can't bet on Cleveland right now either. I would love to see him prove me wrong, though. Houston at Kansas City has the potential to be a light show if Pat Mahomes is healthy. He was moving very gingerly in the pocket the last time we saw him, and obviously that game did not turn out too well. So is it a bounce-back game for Kansas City, or does Deshaun Watson continue to reign supreme and kind of move towards an MVP caliber season?
I have Houston in this game. Kansas City has looked vulnerable 2 weeks in a row now. Well, they lost the Colts at home, but then they really should have lost to the Lions.
They also got beaten down against the Colts. Colts beat them hard.
So, and maybe this means they'll bounce back or they'll figure something out. I don't know. But Houston's offense looks like Houston offense looks like it'll put up a lot of points. Mahomes hasn't looked quite like the MVP self the last couple of weeks here, so I'm going Houston.
I'm taking Kansas City because I think they're going to bounce back. I don't see Pat Mahomes playing subpar relative to himself, honestly, for 3 weeks in a row. I think Andy Reid can scheme this one up. Houston's defense you can light up Houston's defense, and I think that if you get into a shootout with Pat Mahomes, you're going to lose. So that's where I'm going. Washington at Miami, which maybe the worst.
Nobody cares.
Is this is honest to God? Is this the worst football game of the last decade? Of the last decade, at least. This is two teams that, if they weren't playing each other, could very well go 0-16. Obviously, one. That
was my bold prediction before the year that we'd get 0-16, two 0-16 teams, and these are the two teams I highlighted. And I think I said one team would go 0-16. And these are the two teams that I thought would. But now they're playing each other, so obviously that was a dumb prediction by me. I'm going with Washington just because, honestly, I'm looking at the spread and Washington's favored somehow, even though, like, I don't know how they're favored. Like, you look at this, it's remarkable that the Dolphins are underdogs, considering how bad the Redskins are in their status right now.
I'm taking Miami here, and I'm taking them strictly because they have more continuity. Like, these two teams are both terrible, right? There's very few redeemable athletes on both rosters, but Miami has been playing under Brian Flores all year, and
also it seems like, when what happens a lot is when coaches get fired, the new guy comes in, and then there's sort of a little spark lit there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Washington might have that.
I don't see Bill Callahan as one of those guys.
maybe not.
We'll see. I'm going to watch that football game. Is that on? That's probably on at the same time as the Vikings, but I will have that game on. That's a hilarious football game. New Orleans goes to Jacksonville this week. Does Minshew magic continue against Teddy Time, who starting to look like a franchise caliber quarterback? Yeah. And if Kirk doesn't play well last week, by the way, imagine. Yeah, anyways, does Teddy get win number 4 here?
This is probably the matchup of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Gardner Minshew and Teddy Bridgewater. I'm going Teddy and the Saints. Now, you're going to be hearing from me in my lock of the week of this week about this game. But I got the Saints at Jacksonville. I think the Saints are just playing so well right now. Like, they've won every game Teddy started. The defense is pretty tuned up right now, and offensively, it seems like things are slowly starting to open up for Teddy, where he's starting to approach, those downfield passes a little bit better. And Jacksonville's secondary has looked abysmal the last few weeks.
Yep. The difference, and by the way, Jalen Ramsey might not play in this game either, which is kind of the one guy that could change Mike Thomas for being. I'm taking New Orleans as well. I'm taking them for all the same reasons that you just stated. In addition to the fact that Sean Payton blows Doug Marrone out of the water in terms of coaching ability. It's really a mismatch across the board. Jacksonville is kind of keeping their head above water on this Minshew magic train, whereas I think that New Orleans is still one of the most complete teams in the NFL, and they're my Super Bowl pick, so I'm basically going to pick them every week, no matter what. So, Cincinnati at Baltimore is the next one. Another barn burner we got here. Cincinnati might be the
worst team in the NFL.
Might be.
No, because there's Miami and Washington, and then it's them.
Cincinnati's right there, though. I can't defend them anymore. So,
but I'm going Baltimore just because they're not the Bengals.
Yep. I am going the same way, and I don't think there's a whole lot more to say there. San Francisco, the shocker worst to first situation is in play for the 49ers. They are going to
their honeymoon is coming to an end
this week.
The Rams. Yeah. This could be a fun offensive shootout, though. Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay.
Did they coach? Did they coach together in Washington too? I think.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
I don't know for sure. I don't really feel like looking it up, but I'm going to go with the Rams because the roster I think is still much better overall, and I think eventually the Niners are going to kind of come back to earth here.
Yeah, Rams are the more complete team. Niners, I don't buy the Niners at all, and if I don't care if they make me eat my words, I just don't buy it. Period. I don't think Garoppolo's an elite quarterback. I don't either.
He hasn't shown. I mean, they haven't been winning at all because of Garoppolo.
Not at all. It's been Matt Breida and now Tevin Coleman.
Their defense too. Their defense has been really good. Which they haven't exactly played a bunch of elite opponents, but
they got one here. This is also the type of game for the Rams to kind of get their head back above water. And they're playing at home too. So Rams for me, Rams for you. Atlanta, Jesus, playing against Arizona. This is a battle of two bad teams. One of them I thought was going to be pretty good, but apparently
I'm sticking with my second place in the NFC West team, the Arizona Cardinals, to win this game. They're at home. Coming off a win, they're feeling a little bit better about themselves, and the Falcons are just as dysfunctional as a team in the NFL can be right now, besides Washington.
Yeah, I'm going to take Atlanta, but I mean, I can't deny anything he just said. I mean, I feel bad for Falcons fan, man. There's so much talent on this roster. It just has not panned out for them at all. But I also don't think Arizona's very good. So I'm going to take Atlanta here, but I do think this has the potential to be. If you don't have Miami and Washington on the docket, this is one of the worst games of the week potentially. Tennessee at Denver. This is Denver coming off of a big win. Pretty convincing win, honestly. And Tennessee is stumbling still.
So the thing with Tennessee is when they're underdogs, they win. And when they're favored, they lose.
Yeah.
They are underdogs this week, so they're going to win. And they would have been my lock of the week, and they were coming into the show if I hadn't seen something else kind of during the show. So they would have been my lock of the week to cover at +2. That they're going to win that game. Broncos aren't good.
I'm going to take Denver just because Tennessee is I don't know if Tennessee's ever going to figure it out. Honestly, that's just kind of where I'm at with them. I think that, I remember a couple years ago I said that Tennessee was building a championship caliber roster, and I think that they made a lot of the right moves to get to a position where they could contend. But they didn't. They just didn't do well enough, and it's not a. I don't care how much talent you have if it doesn't happen, like if it doesn't show up, it's really not a reality, and that's kind of where I think Tennessee is at this point, where they're in that position where they rebuilt, they did a good job with it. They're not getting results, and until I see them get consistent results, I just don't feel confident picking them. So I'll take Denver, and we can split that one, I suppose. So Dallas at the Jets.
Dallas.
Is this worth talking about because Darnold's back?
No. Darnold's back, but no.
Yeah, I'm taking Dallas too, and we'll talk about that one later with my lock too. Pittsburgh goes into the Chargers. Generally, I would have said that this probably wasn't one that deserves much of a discussion, but Chargers have looked bad.
They have, but I'm still going Chargers and relatively easily because it's still Hodges at quarterback now for Pittsburgh.
It really doesn't matter.
Devlin Hodges.
Yeah. If Phillip Rivers doesn't beat either Devlin Hodges or Mason Rudolph, kind of got a real problem. And the Chargers are also full strength now with Melvin Gordon back, so that roster is as competent as any team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So I'll take Chargers too. And then the final game of the week, the Monday Night Showdown, NFC North, Detroit at Green Bay.
I think the real Lions are going to show up this week, and everything will be back to normal. Packers will win this one pretty easily. Yeah,
I'm on the same page. Detroit doesn't typically win at Lambeau Field unless it's some sort
of Week 17 like last year, where a game doesn't matter.
Yeah, pretty much. So I do give Detroit credit, and I said it before the season started that I thought their roster was more talented than people give them credit for. But
you picked them to finish second in the division, didn't you?
I did, but I also think that Green Bay is a lot better than I give them credit for too. So I think that Green Bay is the easy
I still think
pick.
the Packers have the division wrapped up. So
fair enough. That also wraps up the picks for us for the week. So let's move into our gambling lock.
I'm
now.
I saw this mid-show. Yeah. What do you got for the picks?
I'm 2-3. I missed last week because Gardner Minshew couldn't fully make that comeback at the very end of the game. So kind of a bad beat for me. Oakland did cover. Obviously, they beat Chicago, which is a fantastic pick on your part. So I stand at 2-3, whereas you stand at 3-1 and a push. So 3-1-1. Okay,
what's our standings for the picks? Because I think I was 8-7 last week.
Yeah, you were 8-7. Cumulative picks, I'm 40-37-1, and you are 47-30-1. So I'm shooting about 50%, nearing the midway part.
It's not great.
It's not as bad as I thought it was, though. I looked up that where NFL experts stand, and most people really only shoot about 60%. Your number is actually pretty good. You're at, I think, it's about 67% right now.
Okay.
Which is pretty high.
All right, I'll take it.
So,
anyway, lock of the week. I just saw this during the show, and I changed my mind on it. But the Saints-Jaguars game is a pick 'em according to my bookie right now. So I'm picking the Saints to win that game, and it is my lock of the week because as much as I love Gardner Minshew, The Saints are on a roll right now, and I don't see that Jaguars secondary stopping the Saints offense at all.
That one's straight up?
According to my bookie right now, it is.
Wow. Okay.
Like my bookie, the website.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah. I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
I am taking Dallas -8 against the Jets. Dallas didn't look good last week. The Jets looked way worse. And I know that Sam Darnold is back, but he cannot cover for the incompetency that was that team last week. And I think that Dallas is still a really good football team, even though they haven't really looked at the past couple weeks. But 8 points is certainly enough for them to cover. They are playing in New York, which I get, but I mean, I expect like Dallas to win this game by 10, and that would cover. So they are my lock. I'm shooting about. I'm at 2-3 on my locks this year, and you are 3-1-1. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we stand here. Dallas feels the best to me based off of what I saw, but I did not feel very confident in really anyone. And that's why, bringing up that the New Orleans pick 'em against Jacksonville, that's interesting. That Vegas every once in a while kind of flubs one. I remember when I was betting in college, there was a game where a ranked Baylor basketball team was like a plus 600 against like a minor opponent. So every once in a while that kind of thing happens. But Dallas for me at -8, and New Orleans for Drew at straight up, basically. So any final thoughts before we close this thing out?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, I will say, like I said, the Wild have started here, so at some point we'll talk about hockey, but that's not going to be today, and I don't really see it happening in the foreseeable future. They stand at 0-2, and they look really, really bad, and this is not a good hockey team at all. Timberwolves are probably more optimistic right now.
They played a preseason game and lost to the Suns, so that's where we're at with them.
Yeah, so that's where we stand in terms of Minnesota sports. So Twins are done. Looking forward to seeing what they do this offseason. And hopefully the Vikings can give us something to talk about for the remainder of this season and continue kind of the trajectory that they're on following that Giants game. I believe it would be the first time that they win back-to-back games on the year, by the way, which would be nice to see for the Vikes. So thanks as always for listening to the show. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on iTunes if you haven't already. Make sure to tell your friends, your father, everyone else about the show. And you can find us on Twitter at unbelievable_MN. If you like watching us more than listening to us, you can find us on YouTube and hit the subscribe button there. Like the videos if you want. That helps the show get out there to more people, and we are terrible at marketing right now, so if you guys want to market the show for us, that'd be great. Yep, I think that's all we got. So thanks as always for listening, and we will catch you guys hopefully after a Vikings win next week.